Hello friends, today I am going to be doing my August wrap up. So in August I read 10 books. 3 of them we're going to breeze over quickly. I just want to put my stance on how I feel about that whole situation, and then it's not going to be talked about again. But I just thought here at the beginning of my channel I should say my piece and then we can continue. The first book I read or finished in August was Britt Marie Was Here by Frederick Bachman. I read this for my translation challenge and I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars. I can't even remember kind of why I knocked it down half a star to not give it 5 stars. Maybe just because it did kind of drag a little bit in the middle, but for the most part, really for the majority of the part, I loved this book. Frederick Bachman just has a really wonderful way of breaking your heart and making you feel warm and cozy all at the same time. And I really liked this one in particular because it had this really beautiful story of found family and just kind of acceptance of yourself, and that, you know, just because you're older doesn't mean you can't change your life or deserve better. I will continue to read more of his. I just need to not continue to put them off, because I think before this, the last one of his I read was probably 3 or 4 years ago. You can probably hear my kids running around upstairs. I will try and minimize that sound as much as possible, but they are having a pretty intense game of keepy-uppy upstairs, so I don't really want to interrupt that. All right, the next book I finished was The Bewitching by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and this, what did I give this? This I gave it like a middling rating as well, I think. Yeah, about 3 stars. It was entertaining. It dragged a little bit because I had it pegged pretty early, like who the witches were, who was behind all of this, and pretty much all of the timelines that we were given. So then you were just kind of like waiting for the main characters to catch up and figure it out too. So half the time I was just like, come on, like it's not that hard to figure it out, like just do it. But the folklore in this was particularly interesting because the Mexican folklore on like their version of witches or brujas was really interesting and unique because they kind of have this vampire quality to them as well. So I definitely enjoyed it for like the folklore elements of it and wish we kind of got more of that. But for the most part, now looking back on it, like I did find it interesting, and like I remember the story fondly more than the negative sides of it. I just wish that it maybe had a little bit more of that like thrilling pace to it. I think for a horror, it just kind of meandered a little bit. The third book I read, which I didn't read for any challenges, was The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And this I sadly gave 2.5 stars. I was saving this to read for as we were entering the spooky season, and August in my mind is entering spooky season. And it didn't live up to like the hype that I feel like I kept hearing from other people who had read it, and the success of the television show on Netflix. And I kind of got annoyed with the characters. Or after finishing the book, I realized now it is more a story about this woman like cycling and falling into madness more than it is a story about a haunted house. So I think that kind of jarred me a little bit. I was expecting more like haunted house, less, or like haunted Big Brother, where you just put everyone in a house and they drive each other mad. Again, I didn't feel spooked or scared by her descendants into madness. I more so just kind of got annoyed with her behavior. And I don't know if maybe it was effective listening to the audiobook, but I just found her character annoying more than anything else. I can appreciate the book for what it is because it has inspired so many like great haunted house books going forward. So I'm glad I read it. So now I know and can understand the base material for so many of those horror books that were inspired by it. But it wasn't scary in the slightest. I would have moved in, renovated, lived happily ever after in that house if possible. All right, and the next book I ended up reading was The Marigold Mind Laundry by Jin Jin Yoon. Then again, I feel like I read so many kind of just disappointing books this month, but I ended up giving this 2.5 stars. This, I have a feeling, was a failure in translation, because the concept of the idea I loved. You know, this woman opens up this laundry where she can transfer people's memories that they want to get rid of onto t-shirts, and they show up as stains, and then she can launder these stains away, and they forget these memories they don't want to hold on to. So with a premise like that, like, you could tell it's going to have some pretty impactful things to say about mental health and grief and all that kind of stuff. But with the way it was translated, it came off so shallow and childish in a way. Like, the language was just overly simplistic, and it just felt like it wasn't taking the material seriously. And then, you know, I just felt like it was minimizing people's grief and people's struggles. So that didn't sit well with me when I was reading this. And again, I don't think that was the author's intent by any means. You don't write a healing fiction novel with that being the intent. So I have a feeling something happened in the translation, and it just got translated into this overly simplified language that didn't fit the narrative at all. I mean, if anyone has read this in the original Korean, I would love to hear your opinion, and if that sounds accurate, or if that sounds like not your reading experience if you read this in its original language. But it definitely didn't stain, no pun intended, my feelings for Asian healing fiction, because I did read one later in the month I loved. So I'm glad that this wasn't the only representation I had for Asian healing fiction. Okay, the next 3 books I read, again, we're gonna go over these quickly, but I just want to say my stance on everything and how I'm going to go about acknowledging these books in the future. I did read the first 3 Harry Potter books this month. These books have a very impactful meaning to me from my childhood, and I do adore these books. However, J.K. Rowling is, in one of her favorite words, a git, and it is awful that someone that could write books with so much love and found family and important meanings to people my age and younger could turn out to be such a terrible person. So I do continue to read these books. I will read these books to my kids. I do my best to not fund anything more for her, buy anything new from her that will give her any more money than she already has, and support her terrible views. And I will not talk about them on my channel. I will not promote them on my channel, but just kind of wanted to put my feelings out there as a new booktuber on them, so that if you see them on my Fable or Goodreads, you know why I'm not talking about them in my videos. So that's just kind of where I want to stand on that. I did read the complete Persepolis graphic novels by Marjane Satrapi. I gave 3.75 stars. I loved the first half. The first half follows her experience in Iran during the Islamic Revolution, and it was enlightening, heartbreaking, devastating. Any adjective you could think of for a girl that had to go through war and death of family and friends at such a young age. The second half dragged on a little bit more for me because it was after she had moved to Europe, and I'm a big history nerd. I love history and I love learning about history, so it just kind of left my interest wasn't quite as piqued once it kind of left the part of the book where I was learning about an event in history that I didn't know a ton about. So that's really the only reason that my interest sort of waned a little bit. But overall, as a story of a coming-of-age story and a very tragic part in history, and it was very enlightening and very good. And I do want to look up the movie and see, because I feel like visuals from a film, more so than just a black and white square, could have a pretty impactful and profound effect as well. Then I read The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Rios-Safon. Again, this is another 2-star book. I did not have the most successful reading month. This, I had high hopes for. I had heard it's like, a modern classic, and I don't get it. This has an interesting premise of a boy that ends up with a book called The Shadow of the Wind that is being hunted by this mysterious man so that he can burn it. And as he's unraveling this mystery behind this book, he is learning secrets about this author, etc., etc. If it was just about that, perfect, but it's not. It's 500 some pages of a coming-of-age story of a boy in the 1950s and all of the stereotypical sexist language and ideas that come with it. So the talking down to women, the objectification of women, the ownership talk of women was very prevalent and annoying. Again, I read historical fiction. I get about the idea of putting, just like making it accurate to the time period. So like, if those were the ideas of the time period, then they're going to show up in books that take place in that time period. I'm not saying that that shouldn't happen. I'm just saying that it leaned on it too much and was relying on that kind of idea and talk as the comic relief in this book. And that was my issue, was using those stereotypical sexist jokes of the woman is the ball and chain and all that kind of stuff as the comic relief. And it was unnecessary. And there could have been plenty of other ways to have that kind of humor without it, to have that kind of humor to help break up the more tragic efforts, with the more tragic sides of this book without being sexist. So the only reason I got, more than a couple star, or more than a single star, is the audiobook narrator for this was wonderful and very talented, and I enjoyed the parts of the book of this that had to deal with that history because of the audiobook narrator. But I would definitely not recommend. And lastly, the only 5-star that I gave this month was the Kamigawa Food Detectives by Hisashi Kashiwai. And this was just wholesome and adorable and cute and just all the heartwarming adjectives. But this follows a father and daughter who own a restaurant. Their goal is to be able to recreate dishes for people who are trying to remember a dish from their past, whether it was something that they went, a dish they had at a restaurant when they were younger and they have fond memories of it, or if it's a dish that was made by a loved one who has now passed away, and they just try to recreate this dish by detective work in a way, and it was just adorable, and I loved it. And this is definitely, I feel like, a book I will come back to in times of grief, where I don't want to say it's how to grieve in a healthy way, but more so to grieve in a sense of remembrance of the positive things and not just dwelling in the fact that they're gone. So I highly recommend this. If anyone is a foodie, especially in Japanese cuisine, I would recommend this, just because the descriptions of the food were very, very good and made me very, very hungry. And I love to cook. I'm a big foodie, so I kind of want to attempt some of these dishes now and make them myself. But I would definitely recommend this book if you were looking into getting into some healing fiction. I think this is a great entry point into that genre. But those are all the books that I read for August, and it was a pretty successful reading month, just in quantity, but not so much in quality. So hopefully next month I will read more books that I actually enjoyed, more than just a kind of a middling 2 to 3 stars. But until the next wrap up, I will see you in whatever video comes out next. But happy reading, and I will see you all then.